The first-class cabin shimmered under the golden glow of the late afternoon sun, its polished panels reflecting neat rows of empty trays and folded napkins. Amara gripped her father's hand tightly, her headphones slightly askew, watching the quiet, orderly scene ahead. She could sense eyes lingering on her, not overtly, but enough that she felt the weight of judgment. The air was calm, almost clinical, yet beneath it, a tension throbbed that no one seemed to acknowledge aloud. A flight attendant approached, her movements precise and measured, exuding an invisible authority. "Seat 31, she said, her voice clipped as if stating a fact no one could question. Amara blinked, hesitating. "This isn't my seat?" The words barely escaped her lips. The attendant's brow arched in faint disapproval. "It is." "Or it isn't. You'll have to move," she replied, her tone sharp yet restrained. Amara's father stepped closer, his presence calm but firm. "Excuse me?" he asked. The attendant's lips pressed into a thin line. "The first-class section is not for everyone," she said, letting the words hang in the air. Amara swallowed and tried again, soft but unwavering. "I just want to sit." A pause stretched across the cabin. Passengers shifted in their seats, pretending not to notice the tension growing. Her father's hand squeezed hers, steady and reassuring. "You're making a mistake," he said gently. "She's allowed here." The attendant's eyes swept the cabin, lingering on neat rows of passengers and their unspoken privileges. "There are rules," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Yet Amara's gaze never wavered, quiet and steady, silently challenging the authority that felt suddenly fragile. Even as the attendant tried to regain control, her fingers tightening around the papers she held, the balance of power subtly shifted. Passengers glanced away, whispers floated across rows, and the quiet dignity in Amara's posture made the tension almost unbearable. Eventually, the attendant stepped back, her authority momentarily fractured, leaving the scene suspended in a charged silence, poised on the edge of confrontation, yet unresolved. Olivia's eyes locked onto Amara as she approached, her gaze sharp and unyielding. Each step was deliberate, measured, as if the weight of her authority alone could bend reality. Amara felt it, the invisible wall rising between them, a line drawn without a word, a rule enforced silently through posture and glance. Passengers looked away, pretending to scroll on phones or adjust their trays, their quiet avoidance amplifying the tension rather than easing it. "This seat isn't meant for you," Olivia said, her voice low but edged with certainty. "She didn't ask," she declared. Amara looked up, voice small but steady. "I just want to sit." Her father's hand rested lightly on hers. "It's fine. She's allowed here," he said, calm but firm, his presence a subtle counterbalance to the growing pressure. Olivia's lips pressed into a thin line. "I think you misunderstand how first class works," she replied, her words sharp. A quiet jab at their very existence in this space. A passenger shifted uncomfortably, the faint scrape of a shoe against the cabin floor echoing louder than expected. Another coughed, avoiding the eyes that bore silently into Amara. Whispers traveled softly, almost imperceptible, yet each carried weight, recognition of the unfairness quietly unfolding. "Step aside," Olivia said, attempting authority again, voice tightening. "No," her father said softly, steady. "She stays. You'll see what's right." Amara exhaled slowly, a quiet defiance settling into her shoulders. Olivia's hands tightened on the papers she carried. Her carefully maintained composure began to fracture, eyes darting to the witnesses who, now quietly, began shifting, observing, judging. The invisible power Olivia relied on wavered, her control no longer absolute. Silence pressed into the cabin, heavy, undeniable, and for a brief moment, the line she tried to enforce became transparent. "You don't belong here," Olivia said, her voice sharp, slicing through the low hum of the plane like a knife. The words weren't loud, but they carried the weight of authority, entitlement, and a lifetime of unchallenged assumptions. Amara's fingers gripped her father's hand, but she didn't flinch. Her voice was quiet, almost fragile, yet it held a stillness that drew attention. "I just want to sit," she said, each word deliberate, weighted. A silent resistance against the invisible barrier Olivia tried to erect. Her father's hand tightened slightly. A grounding presence, his eyes locked on Olivia with quiet intensity. "She's allowed here," he said, calm but unwavering. His words were simple, almost understated, yet they struck at the heart of the tension, challenging the authority that Olivia clung to so tightly. Olivia's jaw tightened. "You misunderstand. First class has rules," she said, scanning the cabin for allies, only to find eyes averted, murmurs of discomfort passing between passengers. The silence of witnesses spoke louder than words, an unspoken judgment creeping into the air. A flight attendant shifted nearby, avoiding eye contact while a mother tucked her child closer, sensing the unsteady power in the room. Amara's composure radiated quietly, a subtle assertion that dignity didn't need volume to be seen. "You're trying to make a point," Olivia said, almost a whisper now, her tone brittle, each word carefully measured to reclaim control. "No," her father replied softly. "She's here and she stays. That's the point." Amara exhaled slowly, releasing the tension she'd carried, and Olivia's hands, clutching the clipboard, trembled imperceptibly. The cabin shifted around them, subtle but undeniable. Authority had been challenged, and in its place, quiet resolve began to fill the space, leaving the oppressor off balance and the witnesses silently reevaluating what they had accepted as normal. Olivia stepped closer, her hand on Amara's shoulder, ready to guide her out. Her movements were controlled, authoritative, each gesture a silent assertion of power she believed unquestionable. "Please move," she said, voice firm, yet a flicker of uncertainty betrayed her confidence. Amara's eyes met hers, calm and unwavering, a quiet defiance that didn't need volume to be felt. She didn't flinch, didn't step back, letting the silence stretch between them. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly, each word deliberate, carrying more weight than any raised voice could. Her father's hand squeezed hers gently. "She stays," he said, his voice measured, almost casual. Yet every syllable reinforced the invisible line Olivia tried and failed to enforce. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Other passengers shifted in their seats, whispering quietly among themselves, glances flicking toward the confrontation but not daring to intervene. "You don't understand," Olivia muttered, almost to herself, the authority she relied upon fraying with every heartbeat. Her clipboard shook in her hand as she tried to maintain composure, scanning the witnesses around her, hoping for validation. For an ally in the silence, Amara's small, deliberate movements, the way she adjusted her seat, the calm exhale of breath, amplified the imbalance. Olivia's jaw tightened. I'm following protocol," she stammered, voice strained, each word losing ground in the face of dignity she couldn't control. Passengers shifted again, murmuring softly, the quiet weight of collective judgment pressing against Olivia. Her hand faltered, the tension in her body palpable. Amara's gaze remained steady, quiet and resolute, and for the first time, Olivia felt her influence slipping away, fragile, unsteady, exposed. The moment froze. Power, arrogance, and privilege collided with calm dignity. The cabin's air thickened with unspoken truths, and the silent promise of justice loomed just beyond the doors, carried by a father ready to act. Olivia sat back in the staff lounge, adjusting her uniform as if the crease alone could restore control she had lost moments ago. Her fingers traced the edge of a polished counter, the faint hum of the aircraft below a muted reminder of the world outside. She remembered training sessions long ago, instructors praising precision, poise, and unquestioned authority. "Rule following is everything," one had said, voice smooth and unwavering. "Your judgment doesn't matter. The system does." Those lessons had nestled into her, shaping her sense of entitlement, justifying the little judgments she passed silently on passengers who didn't belong, or who she thought didn't. "Remember to keep first class." "Exclusive," another voice echoed in her mind, the words of a senior supervisor long forgotten in day-to-day operations. Olivia shook her head, trying to dismiss it, but the recollection was vivid. Older black women, subtly ignored, families with children redirected, whispers left unchecked, complaints quietly dismissed. Each memory reinforced a pattern she'd internalized as normal, a structure that had protected her even when it hurt others. A co-worker's voice brought her back to the present. "Olivia, the last incident. Are you sure you handled it correctly?" "I did what was expected," Olivia replied sharply, the defensiveness a shield. Her eyes flicked toward the cabin window. "They need to follow the rules. But she's just a child," the co-worker said softly. "And her father, he's... You know," Olivia's jaw tightened. "Rules are rules. I enforce them. That's my job." The co-worker hesitated, the quiet weight of doubt pressing against her. Olivia stared at her hands, noticing a slight tremor she didn't like. The invisible threads of entitlement and authority that had once felt unbreakable now seemed fragile, fraying with each memory, each whispered complaint ignored, each injustice she had silently sanctioned. For the first time, the world beyond the polished rules felt uncertain, and the realization sat heavy, uncomfortable, unavoidable. Amara sat straight in her seat, shoulders relaxed but eyes alert, watching Olivia's agitation grow with each passing second. The cabin hummed quietly, punctuated only by the soft clinks of service carts and muffled conversations. She didn't speak immediately, letting the tension settle, letting the weight of silence speak for her. Her father's hand brushed hers lightly. "Stay calm. We don't need to raise our voices," he whispered. Amara nodded, inhaling slowly, letting the rhythm of her breath steady her. She noticed the subtle glances from other passengers, brief but unmistakable. A woman with a notebook pressed it lightly against her chest, eyes flicking with unspoken concern. Another passenger shifted forward, hands clenched on the tray table. Even a flight attendant hovering nearby exchanged a look with a colleague, soft acknowledgement of a wrong being witnessed, quietly marking the injustice. "I don't think she understands," Olivia muttered under her breath, pacing slightly. "They should follow the rules." "She's a child," another attendant whispered softly to herself, avoiding eye contact with Olivia, but letting the words float where they could be heard. Amara's lips curved into a faint, serene smile. She spoke only once, softly. "I just want to sit." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried, clear, dignified, and resolute. The sound rippled through the cabin, unnoticed by Olivia, yet registered in the minds of everyone watching. Her father squeezed her hand. "Exactly," he said quietly. "You don't need to fight. You just need to be here." Olivia's agitation grew, shoulders tightening, fingers twitching. She glanced around the cabin, realizing the quiet attention had shifted. Authority was no longer solely hers. The passengers' hushed awareness and Amara's composed presence had begun to rewrite the balance. A subtle power shift had begun, unseen by most but undeniable to those paying attention, and for the first time, Olivia felt the first stirrings of her fragile control slipping away. A soft murmur drifted through the cabin as the flight attendant walked past, whispering to a colleague. "Did you see that? This could go public." Olivia's eyes flicked up, sharp and defensive. "What's going on?" she demanded, voice tight, attempting control. "Nothing, just passengers noticing things," the colleague replied cautiously, shifting weight from one foot to the other. A reporter leaning toward the aisle whispered, low and urgent. "You know she's a CEO's daughter, right? This could blow up." Olivia's jaw tightened, and she pressed her lips together, nodding once but saying nothing. Her fingers curled around the edge of the service tray, knuckles white. She glanced at the passengers, hoping to find compliance, loyalty, reassurance. But the gazes returned uneasily, some with subtle judgment, others with quiet sympathy for the girl. An internal affairs officer stepped forward, hesitant. I should report this," he murmured, voice barely audible. "I'm not sure I can ignore it anymore." Olivia's breathing quickened, and her hands faltered. "Ignore it?" she repeated, almost to herself. "This is protocol." Her colleague exchanged a look with the officer, eyes reflecting doubt that had taken root in the space between words. Amara's quiet presence continued to draw attention without effort. Passengers' whispers grew, just enough to ripple through the cabin. I can't believe she tried to do that," one said softly. Olivia's mask of confidence cracked further, a subtle shiver running through her stance. She opened her mouth, closed it, swallowed, and took a step back. The once unquestioned authority she wielded so effortlessly now felt fragile, vulnerable under the invisible weight of observation. The cabin held its breath as realization settled. Privilege, arrogance, and carefully rehearsed power were unraveling, one glance, one whispered acknowledgement at a time, exposing systemic failures that had long been ignored. Olivia's phone vibrated sharply in her pocket. She pulled it out, eyes narrowing as the name flashed across the screen. Harper. Her heart skipped, and a tight knot formed in her chest. "What does he want now?" she muttered under her breath. "Hello?" she answered, voice slightly trembling. "Olivia," Daniel Harper said calmly, his tone precise, controlled, yet carrying the weight of authority. "I'm aware of what's happening on your flight." Olivia stiffened, trying to regain composure. "Sir, it's under control." "I assure you—" "No, it's not under control," he interrupted, voice quiet but cutting. "Your behavior toward a minor, a passenger under my daughter's care, is unacceptable. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated." Her breath caught. The words echoed in the cabin as if amplified. She looked around. Passengers shifted, eyes darting. Phones subtly lifted to capture the moment. Staff exchanged uneasy glances, whispers rippling quietly. I, Olivia started, voice cracking. Protocol. Protocol? Harper's calm, deliberate tone cut through her excuses. Respect isn't earned by rank. It's owed to every human being, regardless of status or background. You violated that. The tray in her hands rattled. She gripped it tighter, knuckles whitening. Yet the authority she wielded so confidently moments ago slipped entirely. Her lips parted, no words forming, silence heavy and suffocating. Amara remained seated, calm, her gaze steady. Around them, the cabin held its breath. The once invisible walls protecting Olivia's arrogance crumbled under the quiet force of justice. Phones recorded, eyes documented. Social media buzzed even before the plane landed. The finality of Harper's words pressed down on her. Her uniform felt heavier, her stance weaker. One deep inhale, a nod, and she realized the world outside her entitlement would not shield her this time. The silence in the cabin spoke louder than any shout. A phone buzzed in the aisle. A passenger held it up, eyes wide. "You need to see this," they whispered to the person next to them. The screen played the clip again, Olivia's glare, Amara's calm defiance. The words cutting through the cabin like knives. Murmurs spread quietly, tension folding over every row. "Did you see that?" Someone breathed, voice low but urgent. "It's unbelievable," another said. Phones lifted, fingers tapping. "Social media is going to explode," a flight attendant muttered under their breath. Glancing toward Olivia, whose hands trembled slightly as she attempted to compose herself, Olivia's eyes darted around. "Everyone, please, that's private." A quiet chuckle from a nearby passenger made her freeze. Whispered comments drifted. Finally, someone stood up. "She's been untouchable for too long." The cabin, once deferential, felt different now. The invisible power she wielded dissolved under observation. Back in the lounge, newsrooms were alive with activity. Reporters whispered into headsets, editors leaned over monitors. Footage from Flight 407, this could go viral. Typing fingers, camera angles, live feeds, everything accelerated as the world outside pressed in. On the plane, a few passengers exchanged looks, small nods acknowledging shared outrage. The staff shifted subtly, stepping back, their prior loyalty to hierarchy bending quietly to conscience. Olivia gritted her teeth, voice tight. "This is exaggerated. Context. No, it's exactly what it is," a colleague whispered, avoiding her gaze. Amara remained seated, serene, observing the ripple her composure created. Each glance, each whisper chipped away at Olivia's authority. Silence punctuated the cabin as the collective awareness mounted. Social media, whispers, quiet nods. They became invisible hands pressing down on arrogance. For the first time, privilege had a limit. The realization settled. The world was watching. She was alone. And the quiet power of a dignified child and a vigilant public had begun its reckoning. Olivia's hands shook as she fumbled with her uniform, the crisp lines now disheveled, betraying a composure she had always assumed untouchable. This isn't fair," she whispered, voice cracking, a brittle echo in the small cabin. "You think so?" Amara's voice was steady, quiet, but piercing. "I just wanted to sit." The simplicity of her words carried a weight that seemed to freeze the air, a calm mirror to the chaos swirling around Olivia. I was only following protocol," Olivia stammered, swallowing hard. Her eyes darted to the passengers, hoping for some ally, a protective nod, but the murmurs, the whispers, the discreet shaking of heads offered no shelter. One flight attendant leaned close to another, voice hushed. "Did you see her hands?" "She's unraveling." The colleague nodded, tension coiling in silent acknowledgement. "It's happening." Finally. Amara's father's presence lingered like an unseen force, his influence palpable even without a word. The subtle shift in the cabin's energy was almost tangible. Passengers straightened in their seats. Some lifted phones again, quietly documenting. Others simply nodded in discreet solidarity. Olivia's lips pressed into a thin line. You can't do what?" Amara asked softly, eyes unwavering. "Sit? Speak? Exist?" Silence followed, heavy with accusation yet unspoken judgment. Every passenger sensed it. Every observer understood. The realization settled over Olivia like an unyielding weight. The shield of privilege she had relied on for years was gone, leaving only the raw exposure of her actions. Amara's quiet dignity radiated outward, a force more powerful than shouts or confrontation. The social tide had turned. Arrogance faltered. Injustice could no longer hide behind decorum. In that moment, a child's calm had done what authority never could: expose truth, reclaim space, and allow dignity to stand where arrogance once towered. Olivia's phone buzzed again, a relentless reminder of every misstep broadcast across the world. She stared at the screen, reading messages she could not answer, social media posts piling like invisible bricks. "They're all against me," she muttered, voice trembling. It can't be." A colleague passed by, head low, eyes averted. Olivia." The hesitation lingered, heavy. We need to talk later." No one stopped, no one lingered. The murmurs, once silent, now trailed her like shadows stretching across the cabin. Amara sat quietly nearby, hands folded, headphones forgotten, eyes soft but watchful. She didn't gloat, didn't smile. Her presence was calm, steady, a quiet contrast to the chaos unraveling. "I just wanted to sit," she whispered again, almost to herself, as if reminding the world that dignity didn't require applause. "People, they're talking," Olivia said, voice cracking as she glanced at her reflection in a polished tray. Her uniform was still rumpled, sleeves wrinkled, shoes scuffed. The polished exterior of authority had vanished. "Even Harper, everyone. They're watching," a fellow flight attendant muttered softly behind her. "It's done. She's done." The words were careful, almost reverent, as though acknowledging the collapse of something long assumed untouchable. Olivia's eyes darted around the cabin, passengers staring discreetly, recording with phones, whispering in quiet disbelief. Internal Affairs had taken notes. Reporters called her past incidents, surfacing microaggressions and unchecked authority. The network of privilege she had counted on dissolved with each subtle nod, each sidelong glance of judgment. Amara's father spoke only once, voice low, calm, to no one in particular. "Sometimes justice whispers. Sometimes it waits quietly, but it always arrives." Olivia swallowed, silence choking her. Around her, the world had begun to realign. Authority without dignity, arrogance without accountability, could no longer survive scrutiny. Amara sat at the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped, gaze fixed on the muted television flickering news updates. The soft hum of the evening felt like a heartbeat, slow and steady. Her father leaned back in his chair, eyes thoughtful, tracing the edges of the room that had seen so many quiet lessons taught in patience. "Did it really have to be like that?" she asked softly, voice barely above a whisper. Her father exhaled, letting the tension leave him in a long, measured breath. "Sometimes the world teaches lessons in ways we don't expect," he said. "But it's not the shouting or the fight that changes people. It's the quiet standing, the courage to stay calm when everything else is chaos." Amara nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of those words. I didn't want to make it worse. I didn't want to feed the anger." "You didn't," he replied. "You let dignity do the talking. That matters more than anything anyone else says or does. Change starts quietly, with people noticing, reflecting, then acting." Across the screen, anchors reported policy revisions, the airline issuing statements about diversity training and passenger respect. Social media buzzed, not with confrontation but acknowledgement. People were starting to think, to question, to demand better. Amara's lips curved into a subtle, controlled smile. She felt a calm settle inside her, a resonance of quiet triumph. The room itself seemed to echo her father's words, holding the space for reflection and resolve. "Some people kick, some people rise," he murmured. "Some people change the world without shouting." Amara's eyes lingered on the muted screen, poised, calm, aware. The world was shifting, subtly but irreversibly, and she had played her part without raising her voice. Silence, she realized, could carry more power than any outburst.